That boy isn't yours.
Agatha All Along is back with another banger of an episode with episode 4 with so many good moments during it. You could tell they're having a lot of fun with this series, and episode 4 just kept pushing the show forward, having the great moments between characters, having some pretty cool cinematography, and having more plot details that really expand our theories and make us question what's really going on. So of course in this video we're going to be breaking down the episode, talking about any references that happened during it, new theories that are coming out of this episode as well, plus we're going to break down that ending because they revealed so much. So first of all, we start with them burying Sharon on the Witch's Road, which honestly does not feel right. It feels like if you're going to bury her here, it's definitely going to set up something bad, like her becoming back as a zombie or something along those lines, because we're in this very powerful magic place. That didn't happen this episode, but I could totally see it coming back down the road. And the irony is when they're talking about everything that's going on with Sharon dying and the road, they talk about how Sharon should have had 2 doses of the potion because she drank 2 doses of the poison. However, they completely forget that they didn't put Sharon's hair in the potion, and that was a big thing from last episode, and it's a detail the witches didn't notice themselves. So really interesting to see how they kind of overlooked that whole part that they were supposed to put their hairs in the potion. And I'm curious if that'll come back to bite them. And then on top of it, with the road, Alice talks about how her mom said that
the road would save me.
Which makes me think right off the bat that the road can get rid of the demon that's chasing her. But of course, in this episode, we do get to see the demon. We get to see all of that, but we'll talk about that in a little bit when we get more into that part of the plot. However, we also learned that Agatha has been saying the ballad all wrong.
Burn and brew with coven true, and glory shall be thine.
The ballad clearly says, with coven true.
Which honestly makes me think that Agatha has been lying about going on the road this entire time. She says the last time she went, only 1 person came out alive. I feel like the main thing is here is that Agatha has actually never been on the Witch's Road, and this is her first time. There have been moments where she seems nervous, she's not following the Witch's Road's rules, and she's kind of doing her own thing, which makes me feel like she thinks she can cheat the rules, where she's gonna have to follow them in order to reach the end. And I think that's gonna be a big thing this season, and I said this with the last episode, Agatha's gonna slowly learn how to work with people, befriend them, and not betray the people close to her. Because Sharon died, the quote-unquote green witch, it's time to actually summon a proper green witch, which in the end, they summon Rio. And the thing is that's kind of weird for how Rio was summoned, is that instead of coming out of the summoning spot they picked, she came out of Sharon's grave, which already raises some red flags, which my theory when I first saw this was, what if Rio was pretending to be Sharon the entire time and that it wasn't actually Sharon? But that theory quickly got thrown out the window when we got further into the episode, where it seemed like Rio might be the embodiment of death. We'll talk about that soon, because I got a whole lot to say about that. And when Rio was coming out of the grave, it looked like a classic kind of monster that we see in horror movies with her whole body grotesquely moving around, but it also reminded me of Wanda in Multiverse of Madness. Now, the road itself is also forcing them into a home that Alice does not want to go to, which means it's time for her trial, the fire phase, because Alice is a fire witch. So it's really cool to see how we started with Jen, and now we're going to Alice, which means next episode is probably going to be Lilia. And in this house, it seems it's going to be the 70s, and they really use that to their advantage with this episode, filming the show the way a typical show in the 70s would be filmed, with zoom-ins, with multiple people on the screen, with the dividers on it, and like the cinematography matched the theme, which I really liked how they did that. Plus you had the set deck and the costume design all represent the 70s as well. Now while Lily is walking around this house, she sees how the witches were killed in the past, which are traditional ways that people would try to test if you were a witch or not, back when people thought witches were actually real. So we got burning at the stake, torture, and drowning. If you drowned, you weren't a witch, but if you floated, you were a witch, which is the dumbest thing ever, but that's how people thought back in the day. And you could see Lilia crying during this part as well, which kind of makes me think that, you know, either she was tortured or possibly almost drowned, or someone who she cared about was seen that way. And it would be really interesting because they've been slowly tying back to some of her tragic past, and I feel like that's going to come into fruition when we get to her moment of the episode, when we get to her trial. It's really going to show us what trauma she went through. Now, speaking of trauma, we were mainly dealing with Alice's trauma in this episode with how her mom died, because they focus on Alice's mom in this episode by showing a photo of her and then giving us the background detail that Alice's mom was trying to open the Witch's Road with her concerts, having her own ballad to sing. But we know that Alice's mom died from a fire, which is kind of ironic when you think about Alice being a fire witch, that her mom died by fire, but it kind of shows the trauma that Alice has been going through when she lost her mother. So really interesting how they kind of put those plot points there. And we also had Lilia say, Alice, don't, which is her prediction, setting up something else to happen down the road. We've got Agatha try to save her, and we got Alice, don't, which means something bad's gonna happen, which could be Lilia's predictions, warning them of the upcoming danger. Now, one of the other main things they set up this episode with Agatha and Rio's relationship, because like how a lot of people thought from the first episode where Rio and Agatha were really close and were kind of theorizing that they had a past relationship, this episode pretty much confirmed it. Agatha and Rio getting close to one another, even talking about how they used to work and play, which is all setting up what they used to mean to one another, especially with Agatha knowing Rio is up to something, saying it's too early to cause mayhem, and Agatha wanting to call the truth, because it all leads into the fact that Rio might actually be Death. The MCU's version anyways. Because Agatha puts Rio on blast by getting her to admit to wanting the bodies.
You get your power, and I get my bodies.
Which, why would a green witch want the body? And that's the biggest question, which is definitely pushing her to be the MCU's version of Death, which in the comics, Death is a cosmic being, which is the personification of Death itself. The most common appearance we see Death look like in the comics as well is a cloaked skeleton. Has both had relationships with Thanos and Deadpool. And in the comics, Death is an important part of the cosmic balance, which is why Thanos liked her. And I really like how they kind of set that up, that she might be Death, because when we had the whole Infinity Saga without her, a lot of people question where she might show up next. And it's kind of cool that we're getting her in a witch's show, and Aubrey Plaza playing Death, I think is so fitting. But as we continue in the episode, Teen plays a record backwards, which ends up starting the trial. And he also gets launched in this episode, which could be the Witch's Road trying to throw him out of it, because he's not supposed to be there. Now, while the music is playing, the characters start to get burned. Lilia starts burning, Alice needs to protect her, and she draws a circle around her, which when we look into magic, people put salt circles around others to protect them from demons and other supernatural beings. So seeing her put a circle around Jen and Lilia to save them from the burning on their shoulders, it's protecting them from that curse. That curse that follows Alice around with the scar that she has as well. Which the curse that follows her around is the demon that killed her mother, which is what happens in the comics. Which also kind of shows some of the trauma that Alice has been going through, because she's been blaming herself for not being able to save her mom.
It is my fault that everything I touch turns to shit. I couldn't save her.
And that's kind of what they focus on in this episode, is Alice trying to break that curse by facing it. And they end up playing Lorna's Ballad of the Witch's Road, and by doing that, it brings the demon in face to face, and so that they could actually visibly see it. Quick side note, it was a great musical performance. Just another time where they sang the song and it was absolutely fantastic. But seeing the demon come in was pretty cool because the demon looks freaky, but it was awesome to see them beat it. Alice wasn't scared, she faced her demon, and in the end, they were able to escape, but not unscathed, because Teen has been hurt and is bleeding. Which during this section, it made you look at Agatha crying tearfully over Teen, because she's scared of him dying. Even turning around to Rio and saying, don't. Looking her straight in the eyes, which is another push about her being Death. Because why would you be looking at someone saying, don't? It's her telling Rio not to take him away. Not to take someone else she cares about. And I do like how they set this up. I mean, Jen's able to heal his wound, which is great, showing Jen be her potion maker self, and also giving us moments right after where Jen was talking about how the reason she was bound is because she walked into a trap, and that's how she lost her power. We also had Alice turn around here and say she stopped believing in her witchcraft after her mom died because of her anger. Her anger for not being able to save her mom. Hoping the road wasn't real. However, now knowing that the road is real and that everything her mom was doing was for her, to protect her. That's what the song was made for, was to protect Alice. So interesting enough, everything that she was angry about has now turned into sadness, which Lily even comments saying,
Sad is better than angry.
which is true, because you're kind of sad at what happened rather than being angry at it. You're using your energy to kind of heal from it rather than focusing on the rage that would only hurt you more. Now, when we go back to Teen being healed and recovering, he asks Agatha if she put the sigil on him. And this is where we kind of get some key information, where Agatha says that she wouldn't be able to answer that because the sigil, when a sigil is casted, the witch who cast it also doesn't remember. And the only way to destroy the sigil is when it's no longer needed, which I think means that the sigil will get destroyed by the end of the season because it's no longer needed because they were able to reach the end of the Witch's Road, which could be bringing back Wanda Maximoff And the whole reason that the sigil was activated was so Agatha would not know that she's helping her enemy's son. However, Agatha turning around and saying, you don't need to know a person's name to know who they are, is a great moment showing that she sees something in Teen, understands that he's a good person, and actually likes him, because she was scared that this kid was gonna die. She cares about him, but that's because Agatha thought he was her son. And when he asks her about the truth about her son, because last episode Jen told him about it, she just walks off, which is her not wanting to face that pain, not wanting to face the trauma she's gone through. Which means if the Witch's Road is showing people's traumas, that could end up being Agatha's test. When they're all sitting around the campfire talking about their scars, Lilia says she fought a vampire and knocked its tooth out, which could be a great reference if they were referencing Blade, because I couldn't find anything else about vampires in Lilia. So if it's a reference to Blade, that's pretty cool and I would love that. But also if its tooth was knocked out, it's probably not him, but still, first thing I thought about. When Agatha is showing off her scar, she mentions the Daughters of Liberty. It kind of laughs off that they're not around anymore, but in the comics, this is an actual group. A group that preceded the Daughters of Light, a group of young women in the late 18th century preached freedom. However, that group was disbanded and their leader was sentenced to death by beheading, though one of her followers fled to the colonies, spreading the message of freedom in other colonies as well, that ended up creating the Daughters of Liberty, which was a sisterhood of guardians protecting knowledge of a new era. And they were also trained in the ways of magic by Agatha Harkness. So this could be a reference to her working with them in the past, and by blowing it off saying they're not around anymore, it's just her forgetting about her past and kind of playing it up as she was the one that defeated them, but they could still be around. Now, Rio talks about what her scar was, and her scar isn't a physical scar, but it's a emotional scar, because her scar was hurting someone she loved, and it's most likely by doing her job, which is most likely her taking Agatha's son away, because we saw in the last episode that Agatha saw the Darkhold in her baby crib, and they talked about how Agatha gave up her son for the Darkhold. But what if her son was actually gonna die and the only way to save him was to get the Darkhold? So the whole rumor going around that she gave her son up isn't actually true, and she did it to try to save him, which could also be why Rio had to take her son, because her son was dying. So very interesting to see how they led into that. And also the whole episode was leading, like I said earlier, into Agatha and Rio being a thing, and they did that when Agatha tries to kiss Rio. But Rio stopping her and telling her that Teen isn't hers is crossing off one of our biggest theories on the list, that Teen actually might be Nicholas Scratch. So now pushing more into him probably being Wiccan than anyone else. And the thing is, the whole time Agatha thought Teen was hers because of the sigil, kind of questioning who it might be, the fact that he helped her break Wanda's spell, and the fact that he was a powerful mage, kind of pointing out that he could easily be Agatha's son, coming back to save her, to save his mom, to be with her once again, that she once thought she lost. But Rio turning around and telling her that Teen isn't hers puts Rio in the place that Rio's the one that took her son, and that she knows that her son is really dead, and also makes it that Agatha now has to question who is Teen. And the thing is here, Rio almost had Agatha back, but instead of being selfish and taking that love in, she said something good. Something that made it so that Agatha wasn't getting her hopes up and able to help the person she cares about. Which makes me feel like Rio has her own kind of set of goals here. It's not about taking the bodies. It's not about doing all this. Instead, Rio's here to be with the one she cares about and possibly protect her. Even though they talk about hatred and everything, it's kind of like how you hate the person you loved. And I feel like it's going to dive deeper into something else down the road. But that is the main thing to come out of this episode, is that Rio is probably going to be death itself. Teen is not Agatha's son and is most likely Wiccan, and Agatha this entire time thought that Teen was her son. So at some point, Agatha's gonna have to face that trauma that her son died. She wasn't able to save him, and I think that's gonna be a big part for the season, is Agatha, instead of doing everything herself, is accepting the people around her and taking their help and able to grow. And Agatha might, in that end, might not be a villain anymore and might actually go to the good side. So I like what they're doing. Aubrey Plaza's character being Death would fit so well with her as an actress, and I can't wait to see what they do in the rest of the series and when they confirm it. And if she'll look like a skeleton, because we did see a skeleton death last episode too. So some pretty cool stuff coming. Let me know, were there any details you noticed during this episode that I missed? I'm curious to find out. Plus, do you think that Rio is actually Death and is Teen Wiccan? So with that, thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot, and you get to stay up to date with all my Agatha All Along breakdown. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next week when we watch another episode of Agatha All Along.